me tell you a story. Once, on a long-gone island, there was a sculptor. He crafted the finest things of clay from the seabed by his home. He made horses with silken manes and coral hooves. He crafted birds with silver beaks and the brightest ruby eyes. His cats and his dogs had ivory fangs. Men and women had horsehair wigs and seashell nails. Anything asked of him to craft, he could craft. Still, he was a humble man, and near poor, for silver and gems were not cheap. It was not long before the sculptor found his heart won over by the loveliest girl in the land, a lady of high society. Her hair shone silver under the sun. Her eyes were blue enough to put the sky to shame, and her smile glistened like dozens of pearls. Her beauty ran but flesh deep, for her cruelty was as known as her beauty. The sculptor believed he could win her cold heart, and so he tried. Every bit of money he had come by, he spent on the best for his gift. He sold everything he'd ever crafted, from the most humble gull to the finest stallion. He slaved in the heat to carve fresh clay from the loam of the land. He scrounged and begged, toiled until his fingertips bled, until he'd created a perfect gift for the lady. A full-body sculpture of her. With hand-dyed silk hair, a hand-stitched dress, hand-carved pearl teeth, and 2 huge, deep blue sapphires for eyes. She was as lovely as the real thing, and just as hollow on the inside. He presented it to her in her court. The nobles were awed by the exquisite display, but their lady, oh no, she was furious. Mockery was all she saw in those stone eyes. And so, with a shove, she pushed his sculpture, his gift, to the floor. She shattered his art, plucked the stones from their places of display, kicked apart the clay double and stepped upon the fingers to snap them. The pearls of her teeth were pulled loose, the sapphires of her eyes were wrenched free, the fine wig of silk was pulled until it ripped. The dress loosened from the clay corpse. She snarled at the heartbroken sculptor. "I am the finest in this land, and you insult me by wasting these gems on an ugly lump of clay." The sculptor, ever the humble, quiet man, said nothing, and slowly turned to leave her court. The lords and ladies glanced his way, pitying him. His heart was as shattered as his gift. He had no money for food, let alone gems and silver. He had no energy left for digging more clay. He was broken in body, soul, and heart. It was no wonder that he climbed the highest peak on the island and jumped from it to end his life. He could find no point in it anymore. It was so strange what happened next. When the sculptor leapt into the sea, he let himself sink and drown. Somehow, his death gave life to everything he had ever crafted. The horses stamped their hooves and whinnied with new life. The birds flapped their wings and cawed. The dogs howled, the cats meowed. The humans stood and looked about them, and the copy of his fair lady, shattered as she was, began to move. All the things he had ever laid hand on, had a hand in crafting, sprung to life when his ended. These creatures went mad from grief, knowing full well the atrocity against their maker. And so, they sought revenge, as most outraged creatures do. The horses trampled the people underhoof. The birds plucked eyes while swooping down from above. The cats and dogs savaged anyone in reach with their sharpened fangs. And every human grabbed anything they could and bludgeoned, strangled, and stabbed anyone who dared to sleep that night. By dawn the next day, only one person, one flesh and bone person, was left on the island. It was the lady. She awoke to find no one. Nothing but massacred lords and ladies of her court. Peasants and townsfolk, bludgeoned, beaten, trampled to death, but not a single living flesh and bone soul to be found. There was a sound behind her. In the door to her home stood the desiccated, eyeless, gaping-mouthed, shambling copy of herself. The lady screamed, the island silent around her but for the raspy noises of rage of the clay creatures that slowly descended upon her. The horses chased her from boats, the birds dove her face and pecked her eyes, trying to blind her. The dogs bayed, the cats hissed, humans tore at her clothes and hair. Altogether, the desiccated copy of her leading the way, they chased her to the very cliff their maker leapt from. Her shattered copy dove for her, and every piece latched and hammered until the copy and the lady fell into the water below. Justice for their fallen creator had been served, barely within a day of his demise. Their vengeance sought, and no purpose left, the sculptors gathered together and began to trample the island into the sea. The horses kicked sand, the dogs dug, the cats dug, humans dug, and when they could dig no more, they trampled, they kicked. These clay creatures did not stop until their hands, feet, paws, hooves, and claws were worn down, and the island collapsed into the sea, never to see sunlight again. When the water covered them all, they grew still, and very slowly let the natural flow of the ocean wear them away to turn back into clay. Their finely misted bodies covered the corpses of what was once a bustling kingdom. And that was the fall of Atlantis. Forever a lesson on the cruelty of spoiled beauty and blind love. If you, unlike certain large corporations, enjoy horror and being scared, you can support this channel on Patreon located in the link in the description below. Good night.